Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. Today I am taking something that has been collecting dust in my studio and I'm going to turn it into amazing textured collage papers. Lots of options, lots of possibilities. If you're not a subscriber, please hit that subscribe button. If you are a subscriber, thank you. But you may want to check that you've clicked on the bell so you'll be notified of upcoming videos. So I am going to turn this twisted paper into something that will add to my mixed media and art journaling projects. Now you might have some of this twisted paper in your stash. You can get the thin stuff or the thick stuff. The thin stuff I know they even still sell on Amazon, and I will link to that. But check your stash, check your crafty friend's stash, because you might find some lying around there. It also might end up in your local thrift store. So first off, I'm going to get this into a state that is more accessible and usable. On the coil, it's simply not getting used. Too much of an effort to go drag it out, start pulling it apart. So I am just cutting it with an X-Acto knife like you saw me doing, and I'm cutting it to size. Now the size that I'm cutting these to is being determined by what I may want to use them. I may want to use it solidly on the back or on the surface of an entire art journal page. So I create 7x10s and I create 9x12. That's the biggest. So that's kind of what I'm going. With the thin stuff, again, I'm cutting it. It is hard on the hands to do this. So what I ended up doing is I cut a bunch of it out and then I put on some binge-worthy TV show and I pulled them all out and did all that work. So here are my efforts. I've got all the white paper from the thick and some of the thin stuff as well. So we are going to take these and turn them into amazing collage papers in different ways. I saved the packaging from my 12x12 stencils and I keep the paper in it. That gives firmness, and that's just going to allow me to, when this is wet and I have paint on it and it needs to dry, I can just lift it, pull it off to the side and do another, which is perfect when we do these stash builder kind of activities. So you might want to consider it. So I'm using my small gel plate and brayering on acrylic paint, black here, and I am stamping. So on a collection of these pages, what I'm going to do is just add some black and white stamping and stenciling. This is bubble wrap that I'm using right here, and just grunging it up. I am not going to colorize this because this keeps my options open. So some of the white paper here, the thicker, wider paper, I'm just going to leave white. Then I can, if I have a specific project and I have some real idea of where I want to go, I can use that. Some I'm doing what I'm doing here. I'm stamping and stenciling on it, adding some marks, all in black, so I can again use it for any color scheme as I see fit. Now when I use these collage papers, and you're going to hear me say this a lot of times, sometimes I want to cover the entire surface of whatever size I'm working on. Sometimes I may want to just use portions of it. And with this I can do both. So here I'm using some acrylic stamps and stamping. And the one you see me creating right here, you're actually going to see me take it to the next level at the end of this video, and then there's another video where I actually turn it into an art journal page. So again, I am doing a combination of stamps and stencils, just like you would make DIY tissue paper. Now you can do the same kind of stenciling with black, with white, on those colored ones. Now a lot of what you can find are these colored twisted papers, and I'm going to deal with how I would use this later in the video, because I think I would do it differently. but you can add a few marks on it just to make it all the more interesting. So right off the bat, it's textured, which is going to add something to your project, and now you've added some pattern as well. Again, I am simply using black acrylic paint and going on. I'm not trying to get perfect stenciling here or perfect stamping. I am just adding marks and interest. And I find the benefit of when I do a stash builder, I'm not thinking about the finished product, and sometimes I'm more creative and more open. Now here was something that I don't know why I decided to use the brayer and run it across, but it made this amazing grungy, almost it looks like tree bark to some degree. I'd like to play that up with different colors and see where that goes, but I love that. That can make a very interesting collage paper. So there's the white ones with some black stamping and stenciling. So on these, I am going to colorize some of them. Now, in order to get the acrylic paint to soak into the paper, what I found is you needed to spray it quite a bit with water. Now, what happens here is it kind of soaks into the paper, similar to what it would when you do DIY coffee filters. So I'm getting the same effect that I love with using coffee filters on a much bigger surface. The problem with the coffee filters is always that they were round and only a limited size. I'm using color scheme. I showed the color wheel a little minute ago. I'm using color schemes that I know do not make mud. And if you look at your color wheel, if you stick to colors nearby each other on the color wheel, you can be guaranteed that. So now that I've colorized it, you might have noticed that it has stretched out. You do lose some of the wrinkles, but not all. You still end up with amazing texture. So here I am just basically using this as a masterboard, or I'm making a interesting background on here. And I have a whole bunch of stencils that I've pulled out to use on this, so you might be seeing me use them again, and I will list some of them in the description box, but you should know that there is a link to Ninny's Napkins, where you can get a lot of the TCW stencils, as well as there is a link to the TCW Shopify store. So you can look in both places and find the stencil that would be a perfect stash builder for you. This one's called Hole Punch. The other one was Kaleidoscope, and I'm adding some white. Here I'm using some bubble wrap, and I found, using the brayer was the perfect way to get that on there, or a makeup sponge. So why would you want collage papers? For the same reason you use scrapbook papers or you use gel prints. These can be Insta backgrounds. They can be for, you can paint by collaging, like make a flower with it. This is chicken wire reversed, and I'm doing a little bit of black on here. Now I like having collage papers at various states of doneness and various layers. Some can have lots, some can just be colored. Now as I'm going to colorize these, and I'm going to show many examples of it so you get kind of color schemes. This one is deep violet and orange, and I love that red color that those two combine to make. This one is bright aqua, and I think it's gray purple, but dioxazine purple would work too. This is a winning color one. I've sprayed it, I've wet it, the sponge is wet, and I just want it to go on. And when it soaks into this material, like the coffee filter, you get kind of a watercolory effect. The advantage of this over the coffee filter is it's larger, so you can make a larger thing to use. It also has that texture in it. This is stitching, one of my newest favorites. So I could leave it at this stage and that would be fine. The advantage to having it is also that these are several stages in, so it kind of jump starts your creative process. You can use this as an Insta background and add one or two more stamps or stencils, a little texture paste maybe, focal image, sentiment, and you're off. So if you're limited in time sometimes to create, having things like this in your stash is invaluable. It's also invaluable to have these things in your stash when you're going through a creative slump and you don't know what to do. Sometimes if you grab something that's already been done and you can go, okay, I'm going to start there. It makes the creative process a little less overwhelming. And I decide I'm going to splatter with white or gold. I'm not even sure what I splattered with. Decided I'm going to add some splatters to that. And again, when you do a stash builder, you have one big mess and you clean it up once. And that's the other advantage. Here I'm using Prussian blue and dioxazine purple. I'm picking colors that I love. I'm picking colors to make collage papers that I'm sorry, I have a problem with my throat today. I'm picking colors that I love. This is Fantangle, and oh, I love the movement of this one. And I like adding white to any background or collage paper. Here I'm using this dot stamp, another staple that I use so much. I'm using bright aqua. I've got all these paints from previous ones. I've got them on my palette, so I'm using them up. So nothing is wasted. This one, again, spraying it. I'm using Prussian blue with Naples yellow. Together they make a teal color. So be sure, either test out a new color scheme or go with something tried and true, something that you know you're going to use. You don't want to take something and make something and just store it. The goal is to use it. When I got to this, I thought, what happens if I crumple this up? Will I get interesting crinkles? And the answer is yes. But what you need to do here is crinkle it up and let it completely dry. Now this is not completely dry, but you can see that it's added another layer or a different kind of texture that you can use on your collage papers. So I would take some of these and just put colors on them, crinkle them up like this, and let them completely dry before you break them apart and then use them on your pages. I love when I do stash builder videos because so often I don't even know where it's going to end up. This is yellow oxide, little bright yellow. And I'm adding some quinacridone magenta here. When you're doing these, there is no right and wrong. Experiment, have fun, explore. And then I'm using some of the same colors when I do some stamping or stenciling, or black and white. Go for contrast or the same colors. When this dries, it will be a little less bright than when it's wet. So here's some of that blue thin paper, And you know, it's kind of a pastel blue, so you can take these and paint them a darker color like I did here. And here I'm brayering on to get some texture. You can stamp on them. Anything that I did on the larger sheets, I can do on these. Now the problem with them being colored, and that might be what you have in your stash, or that might be the only thing that you can find, I am going to show you what I would do. And then I'm adding some stamping. And you make some interesting papers. Back to some bigger ones. I know some of this is repetitive, but I am using different color schemes and different stamps. And if something here gives you an idea, reminds you of something that you have in your stash, I think it's important for me to just leave this footage in, albeit I have sped it up quite a lot. Here I'm just adding some orange. Doing a stash builder like this is also when you've got little bits of paint left in tubes and you want to use that up. This is a great way of using it up, turning it into something that's valuable. And this is a sink liner that I'm using as a stamp. This is another sink liner. Mark makers. Anything that I use on my gel plate, I can use here. Anything that I use as mark makers on that, I can use on these papers as well. This is a stamp that I got from the Dollar Tree. Using that pink one, and I'm just painting it a darker color. Because again, I don't know how much I'm going to use that pastel color. Now, you can also take gesso and paint this white so that you have a white base. Now, spoiler alert, I would not do this. I'm going to show you a better way, a quicker way. I think painting a whole bunch of this ahead of time just with gesso might be a waste of time. I came up with a better way. Stay tuned. You can use neons. Here I've got some neon paint that I haven't used, and I thought I'm going to use some neon paint with some light blue permanent. Kind of getting kind of an ombre look here. Is that neon or is that just green yellow? It could be neon green yellow or it could be not. I filmed this video about a month ago and then it kind of sat, so memory is not as good. Jungle Vines, a great stencil, lots of movement. When you look at the final one of this, you'll see how much lighter it got. Here's some definite neons that I'm using. I like when the yellow and the pink meld together. They make this nice coral color, also neon. Using a slightly darker color to add some contrast here. I try to limit how many stencils I take out, how many mark makers I take out. If I'm doing a stash builder, I don't want too much of a mess because it ends for a big cleanup. But then I might do a stash builder and do 10 pages, put it away. The next time I do a stash builder using these papers, I'm going to pick out different stencils and I'm going to get different collage papers. So here are the black and white ones. Now I can use this, again, I can use it to cover the entire substrate that I'm working on, or I could use parts of it in select ways. And I'm going to show how I'm going to, ways that I might be using it, just to give you a better idea, because I want you to be able to make this and then use it. And here is just kind of a flip through of the finished ones. And you can see that watercolory look, and you can see how they've faded as they've dried. And FYI, they do take a bit of time to dry because you've added a lot of water on there. Loving some of these backgrounds. I can add more stamping and stenciling if I so choose. I can add whatever. This is just several steps in. So here I'm taking just the white paper and I'm ripping it and gluing it onto my art journal page. I call this kind of rip and strip, and I can do that with any of the colorized ones or the stamped ones or the plain. And depending on what I'm creating and what I want, I might be starting from scratch with the white like you see me doing here. And then let that dry. You can do that the same with the thin paper, no problems. Now here I took some and I ripped a strip of the twisted paper and I added book paper and collaged it down. Now you can still see the texture there, but you can bring out that texture. Now I might not necessarily bring out the texture at this stage. I might do more finishing the page. Here I'm putting black acrylic paint on a Ranger blending foam and just rubbing it on the high points, and that's just bringing out the texture. Black will work on that, a contrasting color, black, white, a darker color, or a metallic. Now this one I am going to use as an Insta background. I'm not going to rip parts of it. I'm going to use it to cover the entire background. And once that's done, I'm going to colorize it. I'm going on a nautical theme for this, and there will be a video showing this as I finish this art journal page. But that's how easy is it to colorize it once you have that black and white already stamped on it. So you got texture, you got marking. I'm just adding color now. All I really need to do is slap on a focal point and away we go, right? Here I'm just going to use it, again, any size substrate. I'm just going to attach this one to a tag. Now I'm using, and I've found that gel medium works best to glue it down. And I am working here to make sure that the wrinkles are still there. Like, remember I showed you I painted this with white gesso? I don't think you need to do that. What you need to do is, if you have colored twisted paper, all you need to do is whatever part you want to use. Here I'm just going to rip some off in the blue, and I'm going to add some texture to this 7x10. Now at other times I've used gesso to glue down, use it as an adhesive, but that wasn't working here. So I quickly put down the gesso and I'm using gel medium, and significantly better success with that. So gel medium is the way to go in my mind, but I left that in. It's an experiment. Like I said, when I start this, sometimes I don't know. I am throwing myself into the experimental mode to try to figure out how to use it. I'm just gluing it down. It's looking a little cloudy because I didn't clean my brush from the gesso, because I really don't care, but gel medium to gluing it down works best. Once that's dry, now I'm taking a coat of gesso and I am gessoing the entire page, the twisted paper and the page, preparing it for everything that comes next. And then you can, once that's dry, you can colorize it. And where you see the texture, it is going to show up. And you're going to see a close-up of that in a bit, but you can even see it from now, I think, that the texture is showing up. So it's adding some interest to your page. And again, I love that I'm using something that was just collecting dust in my studio, and now it's going to look at that amazing texture. Now you can already see it. In a bit, I'm going to show you a way to bump up that texture. Kind of showed you a little bit before. Taking the dark paint and just rubbing it over top of the texture. And that's just, how easy is this mark making and patterning? Now, if I was actually doing this page, I may not do this part till I have the focal point on, till I know more what's going to happen. But for the sake of this video, I wanted to show you how, look at that amazing texture. Totally organic, totally easy. Loving that. So I'm going to store the white ones in these plastic envelopes that I got off Amazon. The colored ones, I can put in an envelope as well and keep it with my collage items. But what I decided to do was to file it with my gel prints, with my coffee filters, so I have all those collage papers in one place. I'm not opening up 4 different packages to find them. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you give this a try, especially if you have some twisted paper hanging out in some dark corner of your craft room. Until next time, go get creative.